what are some common mistakes entrepreneurs make in their customer discovery?
Almost all of the problems I've encountered, I've been a part of some startup ideation processes and some incubators that try to guide startups with this. And almost always the problem is... Welcome to today's episode of How Startups Grow. With this podcast, we help founders launch and run a successful startup by giving them actionable insights that help them succeed. This podcast is brought to you by Performato, the startup marketing agency. This is How Startups Grow. Welcome to today's episode of How Startups Grow. If you're building a startup, it's absolutely crucial to build a product that's actually worth selling and that people are into. Now, to get to this point, some people have amazing ideas which they think are going to scale well, and they think they're going to build an amazing business around that, but reality often strikes. Now, to solve this problem, to build something that people actually want, we can use the customer development model by Steve Blank, which is about finding a problem worth solving, building a solution that people are willing to use and pay for, and eventually building your company out into a great one. So this episode will actually consist of two parts. The customer development model is focused on the search phase, which happens first. It's where you find your ideal ID. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. And the next episode is going to be about the execution phase, which is about building a company, scaling your execution, and ultimately becoming a large company with the product that you found out. So today's episode is hosted again with me and Dennis here as well. Dennis, thank you for being here with me again. We're going to go deep into the customer development model.
Michelle, happy to be here. Let's dive right in. So could you share your thoughts on customer development as a whole and why it's important?
So a lot of companies, they have amazing product ideas, they feel. And they launch that product idea, they build a company around it. But somewhere along the lines, either your company is not succeeding in the way you were expecting to, or it's going well at first, but you hit a roadblock on your growth. Now, this is often due to a lack of product market fit. The customer development model is basically a way to safely build a business with a business idea that people like, and from there on move forward into scaling that into execution as well.
How have customer development practices evolved over the years, and what new trends are you seeing in this field?
Yeah, so it initially started with a model from Steve Blank, which was about the customer development model. Now, he wrote a few books such as 4 Steps to Epiphany, which is about this model. The Startup Owner's Manual, which is one of my favorite business books ever, pretty much. And then also the Lean Startup is pretty familiar as well, which is also about doing research and building a startup in a lean way that actually solves a problem. Now, I do think that the customer development model, in a way, it doesn't need much improvement, but the way we actually use it, that could see improvement in the future. Because the way it is right now, you do the research, you test your assumptions, and from there on, you start building.
All right. So is there also an alternative to customer development, or is this always necessary?
I believe it's the true way that you should follow. Now, there is one difficulty, which is if you are unable to articulate the problem that your potential audience might have, but you do have an idea for a product, it might be hard sometimes to bring it back to the problem. Because most businesses start from an idea of something interesting and not from a problem. So it forces you to reverse the direction in which you do things and start with problems worth solving, and from there on build a product.
Okay, yeah. So customer discovery is a big part of the customer development, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain the concept of customer discovery and why it is crucial in the early stages of a startup?
Yes. Customer discovery, this is where you write down your hypotheses. You have a lot of ideas about problems that people might run into. Now, often I would recommend doing something that you already know something about and not just starting a business that's unfamiliar to you. And what you do here in the customer discovery process is you basically I would suggest taking a wall. It could be a whiteboard, it could be a physical space, it could also be a digital space. And on there, just list all the assumptions and all the ideas you have, problems people might run into. From there on, you need to get out of the building, is what they say, which means that the answers to the questions, to the hypotheses you've written down, you don't have them. You have to talk to other people to do that. Now, this is very important because the customer discovery process that I just mentioned here, that is saving you from building something that doesn't solve a problem. Now, most startups fail because there's no product market fit. I thought it was about 46% or something like that. And that's quite a problem. And that's usually due to skipping a step like this where you do the research.
What are some common mistakes entrepreneurs make in their customer discovery? Is this only the product market fit, or are there some other things that are also being skipped or misunderstood?
Yeah, almost all of the problems I've encountered. I've been a part of some startup ideation processes and some incubators that try to guide startups with this. And almost always the problem is a little bit of arrogance from the founder, where you would list hypotheses and they would be like, but we know that's true. And then they think they know, but in reality, they don't always know. And this is a problem because how do you tell the founder that he is making assumptions that are not necessarily right when they are so convinced that they are? Most founders have strong visions. If you tell them they're wrong or that they might be wrong, they're not going to like you very much about it. I think this is one of the biggest problems that startups face in this phase because the founder just has a strong idea.
And everybody is too scared to discuss this.
Yeah, they're either too scared or they tell him and the founder or her and the founder does not listen.
They're too proud.
Yeah, and I've seen that multiple times where the founder just doesn't listen, even when there is data. And that's crazy. So what you can imagine here is that you start a business and you're like, I have this product, you build the product, it launches onto the market. And then in comes, I was a marketeer at the time. I came in as a marketing manager for this company. And I do some A/B testing in the market to find out what people are actually looking for. And then the people were looking for something entirely different than the business he built. And I was doing research, interviews, surveys, A/B tests with advertising campaign, A/B tests on the website. But everything pointed in the direction that the founder was wrong in some very basic assumptions. So I told the founder, and we never got along. It was so, it's so difficult to tell somebody that because it's their passion project. Their entire life is in there. Sometimes you need to show some humility as a founder to learn how you can actually improve and build something greater than what you're already building.
Yeah. It's almost more important to be right than to actually win in this scenario.
Yeah. There's a saying in Dutch. So the Dutch saying is, which means, are you right or will people tell you that you're right? And most founders, they need to be told the truth, but they want to be right too badly. So they can't be right. They want to feel right. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also very complicated. You started a business and maybe it's actually working. So you got it off the ground and then people are telling you that you're not doing it right. I think that's also quite difficult to just accept that. But I think if you get this response or you have the data or you get this response from multiple people, then you should indeed listen. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing as well. So a weak product market fit, that's actually the next phase we're going to talk about, customer validation. But just going ahead of that, a weak product market fit, you can usually still build a business on it. But the problem is that most businesses that do not have a very strong product market fit, they will either die out or they will stay mediocre. And there's the problem, because a mediocre business, you can be like, yeah, it's profitable, it's growing, and it's not growing fast, but it is growing. So we have a good business here. And that's a problem because then you're going to be stuck in the loop where you're like, yeah, it's good already. Why should I change anything?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a big thing in this model. That's why you need to start at the front.
Yeah. And you would suggest to always look at data for these kind of changes, or also opinions about different people is important in this instance?
I would listen to opinions of potential customers, the audience.
Yeah.
So the idea here, just highlighting the process of customer discovery, a little bit of repetition, but first you take all the assumptions you have and you write them down. This might just be you. This might be you with a team. And then the phase, get out the building that I mentioned, that's when you start talking to people. But you're just not talking to just anyone. You're talking to potential customers in the end. And what you're trying to find out is if the hypotheses that you've written down, if they will say that it's a problem for them as well. And if they say yes, this is very simply said, you have to do something different. I'll get into that in a moment. If they say yes, then you know that it's a problem that they have and you can work on a solution for them. Now, a very important thing when you ask potential customers if they have a problem, do not just say, do you have this problem? Because then they might say yes, or they might not understand, something like that. The trick here, which is very hard to do, is to do an interview where you don't guide them into giving the answers you want to hear. Because if you guide them into the answers that you want to hear yourself, then of course they're going to agree with you. But if they don't come up with the problem themselves, that means they're unaware of the problem, and you're going to have a really difficult business to grow.
I understand. Yeah. So the concept of customer development, the first step is the customer discovery, right?
Yes.
So what are the key steps involved in the customer discovery phase? Yeah. What do you have to do it correctly?
Yeah. Very simple. List your hypotheses, talk to people to test these hypotheses. If they are true, move on to the next step. If they are not true, go back to listing assumptions and try again.
Got it. Yeah. So it's quite simple.
Yeah. Yeah. Not easy, but it is simple. And also, if you do this, don't feel bad if your first attempt is not good, because it makes sense. Very few people get this right the first time. You have to have many assumptions. You have to test all of them. And if they don't work, move on to new assumptions that are related to it. But because you've spoken with people, you will have some insights about how their mind works and how their work looks. So your next assumptions are going to be better.
So I have a general idea of what I want to do. How much time do I spend on this phase?
Basically, until you're sure that you're right.
Okay.
Because this is a step you can, but you should never skip it. Because everything you're going to build from here comes from this phase. And if you are building a company and you don't have a strong problem that you're solving, that doesn't fix itself over time. And there's a saying in business, which is that the problems in the beginning, they scale with you as you grow your company. So if you have a problem where you're not solving a good problem that people want to pay for, if you don't have a strong product market fit, then when you start building a company, that problem's going to stay with you and it's just going to get bigger and bigger. So you want to get it right in the beginning so that you don't scale the problem with your company.
Understood. Could you share a specific example from your experience where customer discovery led to a significant pivot or validation of an idea?
Yeah, I've worked with very few full startups on this because most startups, they simply don't have the money to get an outside consultant. I have worked with incubators and I have worked with corporates that have their own internal startups for this. So one of these corporates, a large healthcare organization in the Netherlands, they had me and the team I was working with at the time analyze 6 startups and guide them to getting a stronger product market fit, getting an idea of their market. Because the idea from this healthcare company was that they wanted to find out if they should acquire those companies for the technology that they had and for the potential market. Now, what we did there is we did a workshop to find out where in the customer development process these people were at. And with some of these companies, we found out that they were actually in that customer discovery point where they still had to find a problem worth solving. But they already had started building a company. So we had to call them back. We had to go back to the validation part of it, to the customer discovery part of it, and just go back to the research. Now, doing this very simple thing, we found out that the actual buyer of the product that we initially thought it was, this was about solar and light measurement devices for offices, because something with light, you have to have the right lighting in an office to keep people healthy and happy. So what happened there is they thought that the buyer would be the people themselves that were interested. But we actually found out that the office buildings and the companies would be interested as well. And doing that immediately led to a larger group where you could sell to. You could sell the product at a lower price, which meant you could just scale your execution so much faster. Because instead of one sale being one person, one sale was suddenly 50 people or more. And this is one of those things, because this company wasn't doing badly, but you can go so much faster. In this case, almost 50 times faster if you...
And how did you come up with this realization? Was this just like a thought-provoking thing, or did you actually talk with a different kind of ICP in this instance, or how did you change this?
So we were talking to the founding team, which was the CEO and the CTO of the company. And we were asking them how they got where they came to right now. And they said, yeah, we were building these light detectors and we sold them to people that are interested in it from biohacking perspective and going into that niche. And then my job as the consultant was to ask critical questions. And one of them was, if you're selling to office workers, why do you not sell to the office instead of the workers? And then the founder was like, I don't know, we never tried. And that's the thing. They never tried. They never looked into this direction because they had an assumption and they just went with it instead of doing the full exploration that they should have done.
Interesting. And how did you continue from there? So you had the idea and then you just started offering this to the offices itself, or did you actually start speaking with them first, validating if that was actually their issue?
Yeah, so we went through this process. We spoke with them first to do that customer discovery because we had an assumption to sell to offices instead of people. It turned out that the office managers and the owners of these companies were actually quite interested. Some HR departments were interested in this idea. And then from there on, we presented the solution with them. We went to the next stage, what we're going to talk about in a moment, customer validation. We tried to find out if they're willing to pay for the solution we have, if they're willing to use it, if people are going to keep using it as well. And when the answer to that was yes, it was just a matter of scaling up marketing campaigns that were already running. And validation took a few levels for us there. The first level was, do they have this problem? The second was, would they pay for this problem, for having it solved? And the third one is, if they pay for it, will they actually use it and keep using it? And if the answer to all three of that is yes, if you do everything correctly, like pricing-wise, you have a scalable company. It's really that simple, actually.
And in terms of profit for this company, when they changed their ICP, what was the difference in like percentage-wise?
I don't have the exact numbers, but I know it went up quite a bit. Their lifetime value of customers went about, this sounds extreme because it's just a different group. So the lifetime value was about 40 times higher than it was before. And the customer acquisition cost was about 10 times higher. So if you would see it like that, you pay 10 times more, but you get 40 times more.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a pretty good trade-off for them.
That's a pretty good trade-off, yeah, indeed. So before we go into the second phase, the customer validation, I'd like to ask something about the challenges in the customer discovery. So what are some of the biggest challenges startups face during the customer discovery phase, and how can they overcome them?
So I've mentioned the founder getting in the way of itself by having the idea. There are also some other problems, which is the team might not have experience with research. They might do a Google search. They might do a ChatGPT search prompt to find out if there is something, but you have to talk to people still. And when you talk to people, you have to ask the right questions. There's a book I can recommend about this. It's called The Mom Test. And the idea of this book is that if you would ask your mother if something is a good idea, she's going to say yes because she supports you. It's not going to be a fair answer. So the idea of this book is, how should you ask questions to people in order to get the answer that is actually true instead of just the desired answer. So that's an important one. Research skills. Something else that's quite important for them here is to organize. So there's this thing where it's very true in A/B tests. It's also very true in research. If you do an A/B test, for example, and you change your headline from this to that, and there's increased conversion rate, you can say, oh, so that headline is better. That's basic. If you do a really good A/B test, you will ask yourself, why is it better? And because you learn why it's better, then maybe you can use what you've learned from that on other parts of your website as well, and other parts of your marketing. It's the same thing with these interviews. If you ask people about their problems and they list some, and you ask them, why is this a problem for you? You might find out that there's a deeper level to the problem. So if I would ask you about your experience using video editing applications, you might say, yeah, it's quite nice. Storage is fine. Some of these are web-based and it's quite slow. So I hear the problem slow. Now, an amateur here would say, slow, that's the problem. But if I would ask you, okay, so why is this slowness a problem for you? You get to a much deeper level, because you might say it's reducing the amount of videos I can have at once. Or you can say, I need to plan this ahead. I need to keep my laptop open at night to make it run. Or you might say something entirely different that I never thought about. Like it locks up your computer and you can't do any work at the same time, for example. Now I have a different problem than just slow. Getting to that depth crucial for them.
It's almost just like asking a few times why extra. That will get you a totally different answer.
Yeah, there's a model for this. I think it's the 5 whys, which basically means ask why 5 times, and then you'll get to the root of it.
So how does customer validation differ from customer discovery, and why is this distinction important?
Yeah, so customer discovery is about the audience and about the problem. Customer validation is about the proposed solution. And that's something entirely different, because then found out about the problem. Let's go with the slowness when rendering videos. And I've asked you about it and you say it locks up your computer. And then I can say, what if the rendering doesn't happen on your computer, but you just put it on and it's going to happen online? You can just close your browser. It's all automatic. With that, how would that be for you? And then you as a user might be, yeah, that actually solves all my issues. I would want this. I could then ask you, okay, so this product, it's real. It costs this per month, which is a little more expensive than what you have right now. Would you be willing to pay for this? And then the answer could be yes. The answer could be no. It could be too expensive. And then from there on, if you have this, how many times would you use it? You would go into the amount of usage. And then there's a final question that's also very important. Now that this is possible, how disappointing would it be for you if this was not real? And then you're trying to find out if they are very disappointed. That's amazing. If they're like, yeah, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing anyway, then it's not that strong yet. So you go into the product market fit with validation. I drifted a little bit with my answer, but that's the direction. Yeah.
So could you, just to clarify, let's in one sentence the customer discovery and one sentence the customer validation.
Yes. Customer discovery, you find out about the problems people are facing and you find out if they're relevant for them. In customer validation, you will propose a solution for them. And if that solution resonates with them, you will know you have a problem solution fit.
All right. So if you go into customer discovery, for what makes sense for me is that you do those steps together, or is it that you speak twice with the same person?
Yeah, you speak twice with the same person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Because if you already have a solution in mind when you're listing your problem hypotheses, that means you're getting ahead of yourself already.
Yeah.
Now, most of the times, the first startup idea, you're going to start with customer validation because you will have an idea for a business. You will not have an idea for a problem, usually.
I understand, yeah. So in the customer discovery, for example, the example that you gave for the video editing could be, one problem could be that it's too slow, the other one could be the quality of the videos, and the other one could be that it takes too much time. These are 3 problems. And after a while, you discover that one of them is the biggest issue. And then you can go into the validation. So you go more into depth, so you know exactly what is the problem. If you choose, for example, slow in the customer discovery.
Exactly. And this has 2 levels, actually, which is really interesting, because the one level is what will people say, and the other level is what will people do. And there's always a difference. So I might say I'm going to get out of bed every day at 5 in the morning to take an ice bath. But me saying that is not me doing that yet. I might do it for a day. I might do it for 2 days, but it could also happen that 3 days later I'm like, yeah, doesn't matter. I might still say that it's cool and that it's good, but I'm not going to do anything. And that's something that happens with a lot of people. There's a lot of interesting tools, but an interesting tool is not a tool that sells yet.
Would you say most companies skip customer discovery or the customer validation part?
Most of the times they skip the first part and then they go to the second part, not all of them, but then they go to the second part where they are looking for the answer they want to hear instead of looking for the answer that's true. So it goes back to being right or getting told you're right. They want to be told they're right so they can be like, yeah, I checked it, I did it. And then they might go to an investor and say, here, I did validation. Like I did 20 interviews and they all said they want this. And then in the interview, the founder might say, I have this amazing idea. We can do this to do that. And the people just, of course, they're going to say yes. So that's a mistake that's often made. Yeah.
Is it common for founders to start with a business idea rather than a problem?
Yeah. So what I would mostly recommend, which is a little different from how the model actually goes usually. Most founders have an idea for a business and not an idea for a problem, like I mentioned. Just start at customer validation. Just try it and see. but you have to be very unbiased. You have to be really searching for the answer to find out if the business idea you have is actually something that people are looking for. And you're forced to do two things. One is to get a critical idea of if your business is good enough. And the other one is, because you have to interview them, you have to formulate problems that you think they are experiencing. So in that customer validation process, the second step there, you can also ask them about the problem. So let's say I have an amazing idea for a video editing tool, using that again. I might go up to you and I might say, hey, so when creating videos, there are a few problems that you're experiencing, right? Which ones are they? And you're going to give me the answer. And then I can go directly into the customer validation question and say, oh, hey, you mentioned this. We're actually working on this. And then you try to find out if that would solve the problem. And don't tell them your product. Don't tell them the end product yet. Just tell them about solutions to the problems that they mentioned. Now, what happens here, and this is crucial with the first part of the entire customer development process, it's about searching for a product market fit. And searching means you don't have it right the first time. You're looking for an answer. So if customer validation proves wrong, you go back to customer discovery. And that's a loop. You just repeat it over and over again until you get a strong product market fit.
How should startups validate their solutions after completing the customer discovery phase? And what steps can they take if their initial validation efforts aren't successful?
Yes. So I will use the model that I mentioned earlier, which is what will people say and what will people do. So for getting the answer to what will people say, you start off with interviews. And you have the problems that you just stated, you have them validated. Let's say you've done customer discovery, you move into customer validation. You want to talk to people, preferably different people this time, because the other ones, they know too much about your business, they're going to be biased. And you're going to ask them the same questions about their problems, and you're going to propose the solution to them. And if that matches with them, if they say they're willing to use it, they might be willing to pay for it, that's perfect. The next step would be to test it in the market. And testing it in the market simply means you build a landing page, you build some ads, put some advertising budget behind it, and you're just going to see if people are going to click on your ad. And if they click on your ad, would they sign up for an early beta or for more information? If the answer to that is yes, then you have it. If the answer to that is no, from either one or the other, you go back to the drawing board because apparently your hypothesis is not true yet. Achieving product market fit means that people are willing to buy and use your solution that you're proposing. And you have a clear audience with that in mind. You have a clear problem you're solving. You have a clear solution. And if those are clear, that means you can define your product market fit, and that means you get the evidence that your product market fit works. And then you can move into scaling that up with other businesses.
And startups differentiate themselves in a proven business model, such as a marketing agency, through customer discovery and validation. Yeah, you could. It would be slightly different because the marketing agency model, it's proven that it's being used by people. So you don't have to invent a product because the model is true, it exists. And other people know what these agencies are. So what I would change here is I would find out which problems people are experiencing in working with marketing agencies, and then building a marketing agency that does those things differently. And then in the customer discovery, you would find out what these problems are. In customer validation, you would find out, hey, if I would solve these problems that you have with your agency, how would that be for you? If the answer to that, it's great, we want to work with you, then yeah, you got a scalable agency model. This could work for really anything if you want to be differentiating in something. What are some common reasons founders resist testing their assumptions during the customer validation process? I think it's because people don't want to be wrong. That's one side. And the other one is they're too convinced that they are right. I mentioned earlier the example of the founder who says, this is not an assumption, this is true, I know it. That is what goes wrong all the time. And I think that takes root in these two problems that I mentioned. Either they don't want to be wrong, because that means going back to the drawing board and admitting that they're wrong, and they told all their friends and family about their cool product idea. Or they just feel that they're so convinced about their own idea
that they don't even feel that it's necessary to test it.
So why is it essential for startups to go through the search phase before moving to the execution, and what risks do they face if they skip this step?
You could really see it as a company goes through the 2 stages of customer development, which is search and execute. If you skip the search step and you go immediately into execute, then you're not really sure how you're differentiating. And you might build a company from that, but you will probably not build a great company unless you're very lucky, which never really happens in this case. So the search phase, it's part of your entrepreneurial journey. And that's the thing there. The entrepreneurial journey is not just building a product and putting it onto market. It's about finding out which product to build, and then finding out which market, and then finding out how to promote it, and then doing that, and then scaling that up. So the journey is a little bit longer than just going onto market as quickly as possible. You need to test, you need to validate, you need to search for the correct business model and the product market fit.
Any books or resources you recommend for entrepreneurs looking to navigate the customer development process effectively?
So books, most of this work I like the most is from the Startup Owner's Manual. I think it's Steve Blank and Bob Dorff who wrote it together. This is the best resource you can get. If you're building a startup, it's written like a manual, like the title suggests, and every step has process steps in there. They describe how to do it, how to validate, how to do interviews, everything is in there. If you want the simpler version, you can read the 4 Steps to Epiphany, or you can read the Lean Startup, which is the most simple version of these books. And then other than that, for doing your interviews correctly, you should probably check out the MOM test to see how you're going to do the interviews. And there's one final one that you could use to test your product market fit, which is a book called Traction, which means traction is signs from the market that your product is gaining interest and is something that people would want. Those books, if you go into those, that's perfect.
If you had to pick just one resource, which one would it be?
The Startup Owner's Manual. Yeah.
Those were actually all my questions on this topic. Any last things you'd like to add?
I think we covered it all. So thank you a lot, Dennis. And if this was interesting to you as a listener, we hope you're going to listen to the second part as well, which is about scaling your execution and building the company based on the product market fit you already found out. If this episode was meaningful to you, be sure to follow us for more content about building a business. Thank you for listening to How Startups Grow.